Xi Jinping didn't go begging to the Americans, please invite me to the inauguration. It was Trump who on day one said, I want Xi Jinping to come. And Xi Jinping said, no, our protocol is that the ambassador goes for any inauguration. But now that you've invited us, we'll send our foreign minister. Their foreign minister is number 7 in the cabinet. Oh, sorry, in the Politburo. That is like if India had sent the Minister of Tourism or the Minister of Sports. Though I think Minister of Sports is probably 15 or 16 in the cabinet. But you send a low-level cabinet member. They didn't care where he was sitting. The Indian press was all excited about, Jaishankar sitting in the front row. If this is the treatment you get after Jaishankar sits in the front row, I think India should reconsider what it considers friendly gestures from the Trump administration.
For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
You're watching The Gist on Strategy News Global. I'm Ramananda Sengupta. Joining us today from St. Louis, Missouri, is Professor Amit Gupta, Senior Advisor at the Federation of Forums in Ottawa. And we're going to be talking about Indo-US relations, particularly post Trump's decision to impose tariffs on India. Delighted to have you with us, Dr. Gupta. It's always a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you once again for having me, Ramananda.
Before we start, I recall you predicting that, a lot of things that we are now seeing in our last interview, a few days after Trump was elected president.
Yeah, I did. It's, look, if I can just very briefly recount what I said. I said, this was on, I think, November 8th or 9th, 3 days after the election. I said, 1, Trump is not a friend of India. 2, if there's a military conflict, he will remain neutral. 3, if there is a military conflict, it's not going to be like the Israelis, where the Americans say, oh, go kill as many people as you like. India will be told to exercise restraint. Okay. 4th, I said, good luck with a trade deal, to which some of your audience was very upset. 4th thing I said was, or the 5th thing was, you can't buy Trump's loyalties, you can rent Trump's loyalties. And the last thing I said is, there is a confidence in New Delhi among the diplomatic corps and the government that they understand Trump. And I thought that confidence was misplaced. And I think if you go back now over these 5 or 6 points, I've been right on each one of them. Though a number of people were quite upset with what I said when I said it at that time. Now I guess it's a different story. Anyway, sorry.
Would you agree that the main problem with Trump seems to be sort of India's refusal to allow us to enter our agricultural markets? I mean, apart from, of course, our decision to continue buying oil from Russia.
It's more than agriculture. I think agriculture is the stumbling block, but he's angry about 2 things. One, he's angry about he's not getting credit for the ceasefire. Right? And the second thing is, India went in proactively and said, we'll work out some kind of trade deal. But when he looked at what he was getting from the European Union, Japan, Korea, he said, I'm getting nothing in comparison from the Indians. And this is really upsetting. So these are the 2 things that have made him angry. And as a result of that, you're seeing a more of a hardline. And then there is a third thing, which has nothing to do with India. India's the pawn in it. And that is, he wants to put pressure on the Russians. And as you know, you're having the meeting with the Russians in Alaska. So he's been told by his advisors that the best way to put pressure on Putin is to cut off the oil supply, which means countries like India don't buy it anymore.
Right.
And I think his advisors don't know what they're talking about. The Russians have lost between 100 to 200,000 troops in this war. That's not a country that's going to back down. And just for the record, India bought maybe $100 billion worth of oil. The Chinese bought $34 billion more than India.
Right.
So to say that the Indians are to blame in this one is a bit sketchy.
Why is China getting away when India is being targeted?
Because China is strong. Look, I mean, I let me put it to you this way. Okay, China is a world manufacturing power and now scientific and technological power. I'll just go down the list and so your audience uh, understands what I'm trying to get at here. One, America developed ChatGPT. The Chinese developed DeepSeek, and DeepSeek is considered to be a better platform. Okay.
Right.
Two, the Chinese have developed sixth generation fighter aircraft. They just unleashed the third prototype in that. Three, their cell phones now are as good as Apple. The Huawei Mate 60, Mate 70 are considered the equivalent of Apple. And by the way, the Chinese have an 80% share of the Indian cell phone market. 70% of all drone components come from China. The Chinese have $750 billion in American treasury bills. Okay. So this is a country which is very confident in where it is today. And one thing you have to understand about Xi Jinping didn't go begging to the Americans, please, please invite me to the inauguration. It was Trump who on day one said, I want Xi Jinping to come. And Xi Jinping said, no, our protocol is that the ambassador goes for any inauguration. But now that you've invited us, we'll send our foreign minister. Their foreign minister is number 7 in the cabinet. Oh, sorry, in the Politburo. Hmm. That is like if India had sent the minister of tourism or the minister of sports. Though I think minister of sports is probably 15 or 16 in the cabinet. But you send a low level cabinet member. They didn't care where he was sitting. The Indian press was all excited about, oh, Jaishankar sitting in the front row. If this is the treatment you get after Jaishankar sits in the front row, I think India should reconsider what it considers friendly gestures from the Trump administration. And look, the Chinese, I mean, the thing we have to understand is the Chinese now, Ramananda, have $900 billion of trade with ASEAN, 780 or 800 billion with the European Union, 600 billion with the Americans, 350 billion with the Japanese. This is a major global trading power. And when you are a major global trading power and your top two partners are the EU and ASEAN, you can afford to be strong with the Americans. And I'll end by saying this. I'm sorry, this may sound like a bit of a college lecture, but the Chinese point out, if you read what they say, look, Mao and Nixon signed an agreement in 1972. That's called the Second Shanghai Protocol. That protocol guided relations for 30 years. Our problem with Trump is you can sign an agreement with him on Monday. On Friday, it's a bad agreement. And this is exactly what happened to the Canadians and the Mexicans. He said NAFTA was a bad agreement. He said, okay, let's renegotiate. They renegotiated the agreement. Now he's saying the renegotiated agreement is a bad agreement. And my Mexican academic friends throw their hands up in the air and say, what are we supposed to do? So you are not as strong as the Chinese. And if you like, we can go into that one.
But doesn't Trump realize that tariffs will ultimately bite the American consumer?
See, the thing is, his followers, his cult, they don't care. They think whatever he's doing it for the good of the country, and we will. And they don't understand international trade. Remember what he said in his first term? I will build a wall. Who will pay for it? Mexico. And the Mexicans said, no, we're not paying for anything. And even today, there is no wall. But his followers were very happy. Yes, Mexico has paid for the wall. So, I mean, what you have is a very strong group of people who show up for all the elections, who show up for the primaries to select Republican candidates, who will support anything Trump says and does. But the bulk of Americans are now, exactly as you point out, starting to feel the pinch in the grocery stores. I mean, cars are going to go up by between $5,000 to $6,000. So I think about the fourth quarter this year, you'll start to see Americans hurting from the tariffs. And the problem with China tariffs, India tariffs is they hit the middle class consumer. Yeah, the European tariffs are. I've put tariffs on a $200 bottle of wine. Your average person in America doesn't buy a $200 bottle of wine. They don't buy a Mercedes. Okay, but you do buy Indian pharmaceuticals, and if Indian pharmaceuticals go up by 50%, that's expensive.
Are you seeing any pushback at all to these tariffs globally? I mean, other than from India?
See, globally, what has happened is the Europeans, who I have basically very little respect for, folded. The Japanese, who are the moral champions of the world, you do know that the two times India tested nuclear weapons, the Japanese hit India with economic sanctions.
Right.
And which is the one reason why I always say never buy any Japanese military products. You'll be in big trouble. Hmm. But the fact is, these people folded. South Korea folded. So the expectation now is everybody will fold. The problems for Trump are the BRICS won't fold. And remember one thing about the BRICS. Lula did not go begging to Washington, please invite me for the inauguration. Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa went to the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice, and he's got Netanyahu convicted as a war criminal. Okay? This is how small countries and BRICS have retaliated. So there are countries out there who are willing to stand up. There are, and India, I think, should be working with them. And I'll just say one thing about Brazil, or two things about Brazil. When Lula was the chief guest at the Republic Day in India, he came with 300 businessmen. You do not bring 300 businessmen to go to the Taj Mahal and see the Sanchi Stupa. You bring them because you want to cut business deals. So tell me, what are the great business deals between India and Brazil? You've done nothing. And the blame for this is firmly in the court of the Indian government. And I'll give you another example here. The Brazilians came to India, said, we'll buy your Tejas, you buy our transport aircraft. What happened to those discussions? And nobody wants to buy the Tejas. The Brazilians were offering. You could have taken the step. Now you're going to have to take these steps. Your problem is, and everybody in Delhi is now talking about, oh, we'll find new markets. Finding new markets, it's not like, okay, I'm not going to go to INA market today, I'm going to go to house cast market. It's not that kind of deal. It takes you 2 to 3 years to find the markets, enter the markets, have some kind of stake in the markets, have a supply chain. That's about a 5-year process. So the point is, and the Brazilians did that immediately. The minute Trump hit them with tariffs, they went straight to the Chinese. Said, how much do we buy from you? How much do you buy from us?
Since we're talking China, how much does the fact that it is pushing the anti-dollar movement in BRICS, as well as the fact that, of course, that it dominates the critical mineral supply chain, play in this whole game?
India, again, when Lula was talking anti-dollar, South Africa was talking about it, but really the Chinese and the Russians. Who was the RBI governor? Saktikanto Das. Saktikanto Das went out and said, oh, we are not going to do this. You close your options. And here's the thing, okay, you are now in a situation, and we'll talk about that in a second. You should be talking about this. about the de-dollarization. And Trump's threat is, I'll take it to 100% tariffs, who's already put 100% on Brazil. And tell me, what is the difference between 50% and 100%? They're both outrageous numbers. So you say,
Right.
yeah, you hit us with 100%. We are going to talk serious de-dollarization. Because look, the
Mm-hmm.
one thing that is happening is the BRICS are expanding. Okay. Now,
Mm-hmm.
the Argentinians didn't join after saying they would join, but it's their loss. Okay. But other countries will. Other countries like the idea of de-dollarization. And
Mm-hmm.
other countries also know that if you allow the dollar to be the only major currency, you have very little bargaining power, you have very little leverage. Okay. So I think de-dollarization is serious. Second thing is, from an Indian perspective, Indians need to understand this. The Chinese are not your friends. The Americans are not your friends. The EU is not your friends. Which of these came and said Operation Sindoor was justified? Not one of them said it. Okay. The Russians will sell you arms and oil, but even they say India is more neutral than it is pro Russian. So your problem now is you're in a tough situation with the United States. You don't have international support. You need to create that support. And the big mistake India made was it never joined the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which ASEAN came up with. You would have had $200-300 billion of trade with ASEAN today. And you
Mm-hmm.
would have had a cushion against this kind of thing. You could have sold Indian pharmaceuticals throughout ASEAN. I mean, we both know that when India was doing the vaccine Maitri program, it gave 100 million vaccines around the world. That is quite a remarkable thing for a country like India, which, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
I should say every Indian should be proud of. But the thing that I'm trying to say here is, Ramananda, the country needs to have friends, and friends who you can coordinate and cooperate with economically, financially, currency wise, so on. And your best bet right now is the BRICS. The EU will never go against the Americans. Look at the way every EU leader has prostrated himself in front or herself in front of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
The Japanese, they talk a good talk, but at the end of the day, they think they're Westerners. Good, let them go. I think India should be talking about India as a part of Asia, India as a part of BRICS, and India should be talking to people. And the other thing you have to be very worried about as Indians is you don't want the Russians and the Chinese to get too close because that limits your leverage. So you need to open a door to China. You already have a door open to Russia. And
Mm-hmm.
learn from these people. That is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Coming back to tariffs, one sort of argument which I've been hearing here is, okay, so let the US put tariffs, we will put tariffs on American, industry in India. How valid argument is that?
Look, tell me which industry in India they can't change their supply chain and go somewhere else for. Okay. Textiles, the Bangladeshis, Vietnam, they're all there. Okay. Gemstones, the Israelis, there are other people, they're out there. Pharmaceuticals, yes, you supply some pharmaceuticals, but again, on pharmaceuticals, there are other people out there. Israelis have a very big pharmaceutical industry, as you know. So
Mm-hmm.
you can do it, but I'll put this differently to the Indian audience. The issue is not of putting tariffs. The issue is, can you sustain pain? Because if you want to stand up, you have to take a degree of pain. China has taken a degree of pain. Russia has taken a degree of pain. Lula in Brazil is taking a degree of pain. Are you willing to do
Mm-hmm.
that? And my point on this has always been, in India, there's a lot of talk about taking pain. But when the rubber hits the road, when it actually comes down to doing so, India doesn't. And I'll give you a simple example. After Galwan, the whole of India was outraged about China. How many Indians said, I'm throwing away my Chinese cell phone and I'm buying a Korean cell phone? I know my sister did that. Okay. My sister's
Mhm.
patriotic Indian. She said, I'm not going to buy a Chinese phone anymore. But you go in India, why is 80% of your cell phone market Chinese? If you're so angry with the Chinese, why is it that when you go to buy a refrigerator or washing machine now, the best deals you're getting are Chinese? And
Mhm.
my aunt, my the thing I want to say is either you stand up like the Cubans did and said, we'll take sanctions. I don't think you can
Right.
do that. And also, may I add one thing to this? There is a real danger that Trump takes this one step further and says, I cut H-1B visas, I cut student visas. There are
Mhm.
331,000 Indian students in the United States. What if he cuts 20% of those visas? Can you imagine the chaos? And again, the Chinese have already seen their visas getting cut. They don't care. You will care. So,
Mhm.
my question to you and to your audience is, are you willing to take the pain? And if you are, then go for it.
Mhm. You mentioned a whole lot of other things like pharma and all that stuff. What about IT industry? What about big ticket people like Google and Cisco and all those guys who have a huge market in India?
See, I'm not that familiar with this, but I can say this. The American IT industry is laying off people because AI is doing all the basic stuff now. So
Mhm.
I am assuming, and I've heard this secondhand, that you're going to see a lot of cutbacks in India too. That the number of
Mhm.
people working for Google India, Microsoft India is going to shrink. So
Okay.
I think that part is there. The other part is, I think what you have to worry about is what happens if Tim Cook of Apple says, okay, Trump is right, I'm pulling Apple out of India. That
Mhm.
was the one crown jewel of high tech production. And I'll give you
Mhm.
another example. We keep thinking the Indian market is huge. It is not. And two data points there. Microsoft does not have a office in India to support the repair of its computers. If you own a Microsoft Surface, good luck trying to
Mhm.
get it repaired by Microsoft. There's no office because they say the market is too small. And again, for Indians who think that the Indian consumer market is huge, third largest economy in the world, I'll give you one simple example. Mercedes Benz sells 700,000 Mercedes annually in China. It sells 300,000 annually in the United States. In India, it sells 18,000. That should give you an idea what the high end market is. And this is why Trump is wrong, because what America wants to import or export to India is high end stuff, for which show me the consumer market.
So, I mean, where does one go from here? I mean, you're saying that India might not be able to handle the pain. India doesn't have friends. So, I mean, where does one go from here?
Okay, number one, you make friends. You treat people like Brazil, South Africa really well, and you say, what can we do? The UAE wants to do so much with India. Oman wants to do so much with India. Work with these people. The UAE came to India and said, please help us with our space program. I mean,
Hmm.
these are things which you should be expanding and be nice to these people, reward these people. The problem for India is always you don't give out enough in terms of rewards. What have you done for the Chinese? What have you done for the Russians? I can go down the list on this. Okay. And let me say this very clearly. India has a serious border dispute with China. Japan has a serious border dispute with China, but Japan does $350 billion of trade with the Chinese. You can expand your trade without compromising your national sovereignty or your strategic interests. And I think that is the way to look at this. So make friends, have a rapprochement of sorts with the Chinese. And as I said, if 80% of cell phones, or you throw away 80% of those cell phones, and we both know that'll never happen. Three,
Mm-hmm.
when Putin comes, sign a deal with him for 20 to 30 billion dollars of arms sales. You think the S-400 worked well. You think the BrahMos worked well. You need fighter jets because you don't have enough fighter jets, and HAL can't produce anything. Okay, and the Russians have a very good missile called the Iskander, which is a
Right.
hypersonic. Buy it,
That's right.
buy it, and you can launch it from a Sukhoi. So you do all this, then you go to the Americans and say, look, uh, we would have bought some of this from you, but the fact of the matter is you didn't want to do work with us. So we went with the Russians. And I do want your audience to also know this, Ramananda. There are no alternatives in the US for the S-400 and the BrahMos. Okay. The Americans make 650 Patriot missiles a year. It's a very complex technology. Number one priority, American forces. Number two, Israel. Number three, NATO. Number four, Ukraine. Number five, Japan. And then Saudi Arabia. You don't fit in that list. F-35, all your guys who've been shouting about this in the media need to go and see. Lockheed has orders for 3,500 F-35s. It's producing 180 a year. Even if you sign a deal tomorrow, Lockheed will not put you number one. It will not put you number 1,000. It will not put you number 2,000 on that queue. They will put you 3,501, which means you'll get your first F-35 around 2037. And by then, how effective has Pakistan's Air Force become? How effective has China's Air Force become? So I would say buy arms from the Russians. Three, the French have always been good defense partners. Stop this stupidity that, oh, for the AMCA, we'll use an American engine, then we'll use a French engine. And oh, by the way, Rolls-Royce is coming to us, we'll talk to them as well. Go to one person, say, France, we have trust in you, and eliminate everybody else. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I think these are simple steps to keep India's sovereignty. And I think Indians should, I don't want to make people think that I'm uh, trying to create panic or so on. But look, if you get threats like, we're going to cut the number of student visas, be very polite and say, you are pursuing your national interest, so will we. So leave aside what Arnab and all these people are screaming about on the news every day. They're welcome to do that. Indian students need to understand Europe is seeking students, Australia is seeking students, Canada is seeking students, New Zealand is
Mm-hmm.
seeking students. You can relocate those 300,000 students in different countries. And given the quality of Indian students, that would be the loss of American industry, which is why
That's
Elon Musk's company didn't want that.
that's I mean, interesting prescription. But we're almost running out of time, so I'll end with a quick question, which is again something that is on top of everybody's mind here, which is Pakistan. I mean, Asim Munir, this is his second trip to the US, and this time he actually sat back and he sort of said, he threatened India in a nuclear format, saying, oh, we can nuke India anytime we want. Now, how much of that is, actually being sort of propped up by Trump in some ways? Perhaps he's, saying that go ahead and say it. And how much of that is just hot air?
Look, I had a student who was the deputy air attaché in Islamabad, and he said the best thing to define the Pakistanis. He said the Pakistanis are tactically the most brilliant people he knew, but strategically they're the stupidest people you know. And remember that from the days of Pervez Musharraf, who should have, there was talk in the Pakistani military of court-martialing him over Kargil. The
I know,
Pakistani military
yes.
was very upset about it, for example.
Yes.
Pervez Musharraf used to keep threatening India with nuclear weapons. That dimwit, Imran Khan, went to Washington, gave a 15-minute speech on Kashmir is an issue, and if you don't resolve Kashmir, we'll use nuclear weapons. And now this boy is coming and saying the same stupid thing. My response would be twofold. Ignore these people because it's hot air and it's the Pakistani way of talking. See, as I always say, when a Pakistani talks, punch them in the face, then continue the dialogue. Okay. But the second
Okay.
part to this, yeah, then continue the dialogue. Hit Noor Khan airbase, then say, okay, now let's talk. But the second part to this is, I think India's nuclear doctrine is obsolete. Why do you keep saying after you hit us, we will hit you? Change your doctrine, say it's flexible. If we're in the mood, we might hit you. And since Sindoor, the Indian government has changed its position on terrorism, military strikes, and so on. And I do want to point this out to your audience. If the Pakistanis hit you first with nuclear weapons, they can hit. It's not going to be let's target an airbase, Hindan airbase in Delhi or something like that, or Adampur or whatever. It's going to be hitting Indian cities. And if they hit New Delhi, if they hit Mumbai, if they hit Bengaluru, they hit Chennai, all they have to do is hit 4 cities. What does that do to India's national economy? It devastates it. You hit Pakistani economies. I mean, it's an economy based in the 1950s. What do the Pakistanis export? Soccer balls, leather goods, these kinds of things. So what India needs to understand is, yes, you will destroy the Pakistanis with a second strike, but how much do you lose in being hit by a first Pakistani strike? So I would change the doctrine, and I would tell the Americans and the Pakistanis, the game's changed, boys. And which way do you want to play it?
That's again sounds like sound advice to me, but then it depends on how the uh, Indian government wants to see it. With that, I'm sorry we've run out of time, but
Can I just add one thing on the Indian
sure,
government?
please go
What
ahead.
I would do if I was the Indian government right now, given the current situation, because there's a lot of big talk. Amitabh Kant is saying we can do reforms. You were running Niti Aayog for 6 years. Why didn't you do any reforms then? Okay. There's a very smart economist in Pune, Ajit Ranade, who's written very specifically on how you can do reforms. But I would call Geeta Gopinath, who's left the IMF and gone to Harvard, internationally known economist, and say, Dr. Gopinath, please come to India, become our principal trade rep, and go around the world and cut deals. And you will report directly to the Prime Minister, not to some IS Babu who has to look at the file for 3 weeks and says, oh, let me make a trip to Rio to investigate. Okay, that is the first thing. Second thing is, whoever is your diplomatic team that has been handling America, I would get rid of all of them because they obviously didn't understand what was going on. I'll end by saying this to you, Ramanand, that there's a good article in The Economist, which is a British economics, well, not economics, popular economics journal. And in it, it says, Indian diplomats are now admitting that when Modi went in February, in private, Trump was exceptionally rude to him. Now, none of this has come, but maybe it's time to start talking about this. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to end the conversation, but I'm sure it will provoke a lot of reaction like all your talks with us do. Thank you so very much, for sharing your thoughts about a subject which is top of everybody's minds here. And I look forward to seeing you again, particularly when you're back in India.
I'll be back in October. So, we will go to the Foreign Correspondents Club for our
next discussion.
Ritual meal.
Yes, I'll look forward to that too.
I will too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramananda, for giving me the opportunity.
That was Professor Amit Gupta, giving us his own irrepressible and, I would say, counterintuitive in many ways views on the current Indo-US relations as we see it now, as well as the world around us. It seems to be in an incredible state of flux. I do hope you enjoyed this particular edition of The Gist, and I look forward to seeing you again. Till then, this is Ramananda Sengupta.